What would you do if the whole world judged you based on what you wore, where you sat, or what car you drove? Would you bow your head and accept their scorn? Or would you rise and make them eat their words today? A modest woman dared to sit in a $10 million car, and what happened next left everyone speechless. Stay tuned, because this is a story you won't forget. It was a dazzling afternoon at the luxury car showroom, sunlight bouncing off the sleek, polished surfaces of a dozen supercars worth millions. The air was filled with murmurs of admiration from well-dressed patrons as they circled the cars, pointing and nodding in appreciation. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A young woman stepped inside, her presence starkly contrasting the opulence around her. She wore a simple cotton dress, her hair loosely tied, and sandals worn but clean. Her eyes, however, held a quiet determination as she moved toward the most expensive car on display, a gleaming, jet-black hypercar priced at $10 million. Conversations faltered, and curious glances turned into disdainful stares. She hesitated for a moment, aware of the piercing judgment in the room, but then pushed forward, gently tracing her fingers along the car's flawless exterior. A snide comment broke the silence. "Did she wander in from the street?" someone whispered, barely concealing their smirk. A pair of affluent women in designer heels giggled, whispering about how ridiculous it looked. A girl like her in a place like this. One of the showroom staff, an impeccably dressed young man, approached her, his expression a careful blend of politeness and suspicion. "Excuse me, ma'am, may I help you?" he asked, emphasizing the word help, as if it were a lifeline she desperately needed. The woman smiled gently, unfazed by his tone, and replied, "I'm just admiring the car. It's beautiful." The staff member's smile tightened. "Yes, it is. But perhaps you'd be more comfortable over by the sedan section. Those models might be more suitable." The woman didn't respond, her eyes still fixed on the hypercar, as if in a world of her own. She reached for the door handle, her fingertips brushing against the chrome. A ripple of disapproval swept through the room, and one of the onlookers scoffed. "She probably thinks it's a display car. Poor thing doesn't know how much it costs." The woman pulled the door gently, and to everyone's surprise, it opened. Gasps echoed. "Isn't that supposed to be locked?" someone muttered. The staff member rushed forward, confusion flashing across his face. "Ma'am, please, that car is not for the public to sit in," he insisted. But she had already slipped inside, settling into the plush leather seat. Phones appeared, cameras clicked. People couldn't resist documenting the audacity. One woman with perfectly styled hair shook her head, sneering. "She's going to get in so much trouble. Who does she think she is?" The woman in the car remained still, her hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, her eyes closed as if savoring a rare moment of peace. Outside, the staff whispered among themselves, debating whether to call security. The woman in the designer dress raised her phone, starting a live stream, announcing, "Look at this. Some nobody thinking she owns the place." Unbelievable comments started pouring in, mocking the wannabe and her fantasy. The showroom grew tense, everyone expecting an explosive confrontation. The modest woman opened her eyes, looking straight ahead, unfazed by the brewing storm around her. The woman in the designer dress stepped closer, her phone still recording, the red light blinking as her followers flooded the chat with laughing emojis and mocking comments. "Hey, sweetheart," she called out, voice dripping with false sweetness. "Did you get lost? Or are you auditioning for a Cinderella remake?" The crowd chuckled, their laughter sharp as knives slicing through the air. The modest woman sat there, her hands still resting on the steering wheel, eyes fixed ahead, refusing to engage. The showroom staff member hovered nearby, beads of sweat forming along his brow, eyes darting nervously from the woman to the manager across the room. "Ma'am, I really must insist," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "This car is reserved for serious buyers only." The woman in the dress smirked, tossing her blonde hair over her shoulder. "Serious buyers. Oh, honey, she's probably never even seen a car like this up close, let alone afford it." The crowd roared with laughter, and the woman's phone tilted closer, catching every angle of the wannabe sitting in the $10 million car. Smile for the camera. Darling, the woman cooed, leaning forward, her manicured nails tapping on the car window. Let's give everyone a good look at what a $10 million dreamer looks like. The modest woman's jaw clenched, her knuckles tightening on the steering wheel. The staff member cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. Ma'am, if you don't step out now, we'll have to call security. The woman in the dress snickered, her laughter echoing through the showroom. Oh yes, call security. Maybe they can escort her back to whatever hole she crawled out of. Another wave of laughter crashed through the room, louder, crueler, feeding off each other's malice. The comments on the live stream grew more vicious, heart emojis replaced by laughing faces, flames, and crying, laughing emojis. The modest woman's gaze remained steady, her eyes fixed on a distant point beyond the windshield as if she were somewhere else, somewhere far away. What's wrong? The woman in the dress taunted, her face pressed against the glass now, eyes gleaming with malicious delight. Cat got your tongue, or are you too embarrassed to admit you can't even afford the gas in this thing? The staff member shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the security desk, debating whether to call for backup. The tension in the room thickened, suffocating, pressing down like a storm cloud ready to burst. And still, the woman remained seated, silent, her calm composure an eerie contrast to the chaos raging around her. Maybe she thinks if she sits there long enough, she'll magically become rich. Another man jeered, his laughter a cruel barking sound. The crowd cackled, the air heavy with ridicule, their eyes boring into her like daggers. And then, without warning, the woman in the dress slammed her hand against the car window, her face contorted with rage. Get out, too! She snarled, her perfectly painted nails scraping against the glass. Get out before I drag you out myself! The modest woman blinked, her eyes meeting the woman's in a gaze so steady, so piercing. It was like a thunderclap in the silence, but she still didn't move, and the crowd closed in tighter, the ring of phones and sneers and flashing cameras closing around her like a noose. The woman in the designer dress slammed her palm against the car window again, harder this time, her manicured nails leaving smudges on the glass as she leaned in, face twisted with a toxic mix of fury and glee. You deaf or just stupid? She hissed, her voice echoing across the showroom. Get out of the car, or do we need to call the cops? The crowd surged forward, tightening around the car like vultures circling prey, their phones angled, capturing every second of the unfolding humiliation. The staff member now stood at the front of the car, hands up as if ready to yank the door open himself. Ma'am, this is your last warning, he said, his voice rising above the commotion. Step out of the vehicle immediately. The air was thick, heavy, charged with the electrifying scent of tension and schadenfreude. The woman in the car sat perfectly still, her chest rising and falling in slow, deliberate breaths. Her eyes, dark and calm, remained fixed forward, unblinking, as the crowd's sneering faces loomed closer. Look at her, someone shouted, his laugh a jagged, ugly sound. She's frozen like a deer in headlights, must be daydreaming about her non-existent bank account. Another voice chimed in, a man in a tailored suit, his smirk wide and cruel. Maybe she thinks the car is a free Uber. Maybe she's waiting for a driver to pick her up and take her back to the slums. Laughter erupted, a chorus of ridicule that swirled around her like a suffocating fog. The woman in the designer dress angled her phone closer, zooming in on the modest woman's face, capturing every detail. The defiant set of her jaw, the tremor in her lips, the quiet fire burning in her eyes. Hey, everyone, she announced to her live audience, voice dripping with mockery. Get a good look at this wannabe. Thinks she's a billionaire just because she sat her butt in a $10 million car. Should we start a GoFundMe to get her a bus pass? The chat exploded with laughing emojis, comments scrolling up the screen faster than anyone could read. Kick her out. Call the cops, who let the street rat in. The staff member stepped forward, his jaw clenched, fists tight. That's it. I'm calling security. And then, as if on cue, 2 security guards appeared, their faces set like stone, muscles tense, eyes locked on the modest woman. Ma'am, step out of the vehicle, the taller guard said, his voice cold, emotionless, as if addressing a criminal. Now, the woman remained still, her fingers tightening around the steering wheel, her knuckles white, her breathing deep and controlled. Outside, the crowd pressed closer, their phones raised like weapons, cameras flashing, capturing her humiliation from every possible angle. The woman in the designer dress leaned in even closer, her face inches from the glass, her smile sharp and venomous. "Get out. Loser," she whispered, her voice a hiss. "You don't belong here." And in that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with anticipation, the crowd ravenous for her to finally break, to finally crumble under the weight of their scorn. But the woman just closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and tightened her grip on the wheel, her pulse a drumbeat of defiance. The showroom fell deathly silent as the modest woman slowly opened her eyes, her gaze steady and sharp like the edge of a blade. Without a word, she lifted her right hand, fingers trembling slightly, and pressed her thumb against the glossy start button embedded in the dashboard. A low, throaty roar echoed through the room as the $10 million hypercar roared to life, the engine purring like a wild beast awakened from a deep sleep. The crowd recoiled, eyes wide, jaws dropping, the collective shock palpable as the car's digital dashboard lit up, displaying her name in bold letters, "Welcome back, Lena Reyes." The arrogant woman in the designer dress stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth as the realization crashed down like a tidal wave. "No. No way," she whispered, eyes darting from the dashboard to Lena, her face draining of color. The staff member's eyes bulged, his jaw slack as the color drained from his cheeks. But that's impossible," he stammered, his hands shaking as he reached for his walkie-talkie. "That car it's reserved for—" Lena calmly placed both hands on the steering wheel, her expression serene, her eyes forward, completely ignoring the stunned faces surrounding her. The security guards, who moments ago were ready to drag her out, now stood frozen, unsure whether to advance or retreat. The crowd watched in stunned silence, their phones still raised but no longer recording, fingers hovering over screens, too shocked to press record. The woman in the designer dress staggered forward, eyes wild, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she pressed her face against the glass, staring at Lena as if she were seeing a ghost. You're lying," she shrieked, fists slamming against the car door. "You stole it! You're a thief! There's no way a nobody like you could own this car." Lena's gaze finally shifted, her eyes locking onto the woman with a calm, icy intensity that could freeze the sun. "A nobody," she said, her voice low, each syllable sharp as a knife. "Funny, because this nobody just started her own car." The arrogant woman's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her face twisted in horror as she backed away, tripping over her own heels and crashing to the floor, her phone skidding across the polished showroom tiles. The live stream was still rolling, capturing every second of her humiliation as comments flooded in, a tidal wave of shock, disbelief, and jeering laughter. "OMG, she owns the car Karma's ABO, get wrecked." "Karen." The security guards exchanged a glance, their faces etched with confusion, neither willing to move, neither willing to meet Lena's eyes. The staff member, now sweating profusely, fumbled with his earpiece, his voice a strained, desperate whisper. "Sir, we have a problem. The woman, she owns the car." The voice on the other end barked a furious reply, but Lena didn't hear it. She was too busy watching the arrogant woman scramble to her feet, mascara running, eyes red and wild, her chest heaving as she looked around, searching for a way out, a way to undo what the entire world had just witnessed. But there was no escape. The truth was out. And Lena Reyes was far from a nobody. She was the owner of the car, and now, every single person in that showroom knew it. Before anyone could process the shocking revelation, the glass doors of the showroom swung open, and in walked a man in a sharp, impeccably tailored black suit. He moved with the effortless confidence of someone who commanded both respect and fear, his eyes dark and calculating as they swept over the stunned crowd. The staff member swallowed hard, his throat dry, as he recognized the man instantly. Ethan Cruz, CEO of Titan Automotive, is the company that owns every luxury car in this showroom. The room seemed to hold its breath as Ethan strode forward, his gaze locked onto Lena, still seated calmly behind the wheel of the $10 million hypercar. "Miss Reyes," he said, his deep voice resonating through the air like a thunderclap. "I apologize for the disturbance." Lena's lips curved into a slight, knowing smile as she unbuckled her seatbelt, opened the car door, and stepped out, her heels clicking against the marble floor like the tolling of a bell. The arrogant woman in the designer dress gasped, her eyes wide and frantic as she clambered to her feet, her manicured nails digging into her palms. "Wait, what's going on? Why is he apologizing to her?" Ethan's cold, dark eyes snapped to the woman, his jaw clenched tight as he regarded her with a look that could freeze fire. "You?" he said, voice sharp as a whip. "Are you the one who called my client a nobody, a thief?" The woman's face turned ashen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, but no words came out. The crowd was dead silent, every eye glued to the unfolding scene, every phone recording, every breath held in suspense. Ethan turned to the staff member, who was now visibly trembling, sweat pouring down his brow as he struggled to keep his composure. "And you?" Ethan said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "Did you just threaten to call security on Miss Reyes, the sole owner of this showroom's most valuable collection?" The staff member's knees buckled, his skin as pale as paper, as he stammered, "Sir, I didn't know. I didn't realize." Ethan's gaze was merciless, his jaw clenched so tight the veins in his neck bulged. "You didn't realize that the woman you just insulted and threatened is not only the owner of this car, but the majority shareholder of Titan Automotive itself?" Gasps echoed through the room like a collective thunderclap. The crowd's eyes widened in unison, heads whipping toward Lena as if seeing her for the first time. The arrogant woman staggered back, her heels scraping against the floor as she shook her head, eyes wild and desperate. "No, that's not possible. She's lying. This is a setup." Lena stepped forward, her expression serene, her eyes dark as a storm as she reached into her purse and pulled out a sleek, black leather portfolio. She handed it to Ethan, who opened it with a crisp flick of his wrist, revealing a set of legal documents emblazoned with the Titan Automotive logo and Lena's signature at the bottom. "These are the deeds to every car in this showroom," Ethan announced, his voice booming through the room, "and the only name on those deeds is Lena Reyes, the sole owner, the primary investor, the woman you just humiliated for sitting in her own car." The arrogant woman's legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor, her hair disheveled, her makeup streaked with tears as the reality of her own downfall sank in like a knife to the gut. The staff member's face was ghostly white, his eyes darting from Ethan to Lena, to the crowd that now murmured with a mix of awe and horror. "I didn't know," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I didn't know." Lena's gaze never wavered as she stepped forward, the heels of her shoes clicking against the floor, each step echoing like a countdown to judgment. "You didn't know," she said, her voice soft but carrying the weight of 1,000 storms. "Well, now you do." And with that, she turned on her heel, her black hair whipping through the air as she strode toward the exit, the stunned silence of the crowd trailing behind her like a shadow. And for the first time in her life, Lena Reyes felt like the entire world was finally seeing her for who she truly was. Ethan's jaw clenched, his dark eyes fixed on the staff member and the arrogant woman still sprawled on the floor, her face streaked with mascara and shame. The room was thick with a suffocating silence, the crowd holding their breath, phones still recording, eyes locked on the unfolding reckoning. "You," Ethan said, his voice a blade slicing through the air as he pointed a finger at the staff member. "Pack your things. You're done." The staff member's face crumpled, his knees wobbling as he clutched at Ethan's arm, desperation radiating from his every pore. "Please, sir, I didn't know she was the owner. I was just doing my job." "Your job," Ethan's voice was ice, his stare colder. "Your job is to provide exceptional service to every customer, not to judge, not to humiliate. You failed, and now you're out. The staff member's shoulders sagged, his eyes glossy with tears as he stumbled backward, the crowd parting to let him pass, their gazes hard and unforgiving. He slunk away, his life in ruins, the weight of his actions crushing him like a vice. But Ethan wasn't done. He turned to the arrogant woman, who was still sitting on the cold marble floor, her designer dress bunched up around her, her hair a wild, tangled mess. "And you," he said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm, "who do you think you are? Humiliating the owner of this showroom, live streaming her, calling her names, treating her like trash." The woman's lips quivered, her eyes darting to the cameras still trained on her, recording every second of her downfall. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice small, broken. The arrogance that once fueled her now drained away, leaving nothing but a hollow shell. "You didn't know." Ethan stepped forward, towering over her, his shadow casting her into darkness. "And now the whole world knows. That live stream you started, it's been shared 100,000 times in the last 10 minutes. Congratulations, you just went viral, but not for the reasons you wanted." The woman's breath hitched, her eyes widening in horror as she grabbed for her phone, her fingers shaking as she fumbled to delete the video. But it was too late. The comments poured in, each one a nail in her social coffin. "Spoiled witch gets what she deserves. Karma's A, B, set. Look at her crying now. Not so tough. Huh." The woman dropped the phone, her hands flying to her mouth as the tears spilled over, sobs racking her body as the crowd watched, their expressions unyielding, merciless. Ethan looked down at her, his face a mask of cold, calculated contempt. "You wanted attention," he said, his voice like gravel scraping against glass. "Well, now you have it. Enjoy your 15 minutes of fame." The woman's sobs echoed through the showroom, a pitiful, broken sound as she clutched her knees to her chest, her once perfect facade shattered beyond repair. Ethan straightened, his eyes sweeping over the stunned crowd, the air thick with the scent of retribution and ruin. "Anyone else feel like mocking Lena Reyes?" he called out, his voice booming, commanding, the kind of voice that could bring armies to their knees. No one dared to speak, no one dared to move, and in that moment, it was clear. The world had just witnessed the rise of a queen and the fall of those who dared to cross her. As the crowd stood in stunned silence, Lena Reyes's gaze softened, her eyes sweeping over the sea of faces, and finally landing on a single figure in the corner. A middle-aged janitor in a faded blue uniform, broom clutched in his calloused hands, his head bowed, eyes fixed to the floor as if he were trying to disappear. Lena's heels clicked against the marble floor as she strode toward him, the crowd parting like the Red Sea, eyes wide, whispers thick and heavy like a storm cloud ready to burst. The janitor's eyes flicked up, fear and confusion etched deep into his weary face as Lena stopped before him, her expression warm, kind, a gentle contrast to the storm she had just unleashed. "Mr. Alvarez," she said, her voice soft, yet carrying the weight of a queen addressing her most loyal subject. "You offered me a glass of water earlier when no one else even looked my way." The janitor swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing as he nodded, eyes brimming with uncertainty. "Yes, ma'am, you looked thirsty." A faint smile touched Lena's lips as she reached into her purse, pulling out a thick white envelope embossed with the Titan Automotive logo. "And when that woman started calling me names, you asked if I was okay, even when everyone else laughed." The janitor's eyes darted nervously to the arrogant woman, still slumped against the wall, mascara streaked tears staining her cheeks as she watched with a mix of horror and envy. "I was just doing what I'd want someone to do for me," the janitor mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. Lena's smile widened as she pressed the envelope into his trembling hands, her fingers curling around his. "Well, now it's my turn to do something for you." The janitor's hands shook as he peeled open the envelope, his breath hitching as his eyes scanned the contents. A letter of promotion to Titan Automotive's corporate headquarters as the new facilities manager, a substantial raise, and a bonus check that could pay off his debts 10 times over. Miss Reyes. "I don't understand," he stammered, his voice breaking as tears welled up, blurring his vision. "I don't deserve this." Lena leaned closer, her eyes warm and sincere, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "You deserve so much more, Mr. Alvarez," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saw me for who I was, not what I wore or what I drove, and that's the kind of person I want by my side." The janitor's lip quivered as a single tear slipped down his cheek, and the crowd watched, their expressions a mixture of shock, envy, and shame as Lena straightened, her gaze shifting to the security guards who had nearly thrown her out. "As for the rest of you," she said, her voice slicing through the air like a blade, "remember this moment. The next time you decide to judge someone by their clothes or assume they're a nobody because they don't fit your idea of wealth, remember that the very person you're belittling might just be the one who owns everything you see." The security guards dropped their gazes, their faces pale, hands fidgeting at their sides as Lena turned, her heels clicking against the marble as she moved back to her car, the crowd parting once again, heads bowed in reverence, in regret, in shame. And as she slid into the driver's seat, the engine purring to life beneath her fingertips, Lena Reyes glanced into the rearview mirror, her eyes meeting those of the arrogant woman, the woman who once mocked her, but now sat on the cold, hard floor, a broken, sobbing mess. Lena's lips curved into a small, knowing smile, and without another word, she pressed her finger to the start button, and the $10 million hypercar surged forward, the sound of its powerful engine echoing through the showroom like a lion's roar, leaving behind the ruins of those who dared to underestimate her. The city skyline stretched out before her like a sea of glittering jewels as Lena Reyes stood on the rooftop of the Titan Automotive headquarters, the wind tugging at her hair, the air crisp and electric. Below, a crowd had gathered, hundreds of employees and media personnel, their eyes fixed on the podium where Lena now stood, microphone gripped tightly in her hand, her gaze steady, her expression fierce yet calm. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, the arrogant woman's viral video still echoing in everyone's minds. The humiliating livestream that exposed Lena Reyes as the supposed nobody sitting in a $10 million hypercar. But now, Lena was no longer the woman they mocked. She was the queen they feared. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice strong, cutting through the wind, her words carrying the weight of everything she had endured. Today, the world watched as a woman was humiliated for daring to sit in a car that she owned, a car that she designed, a car that she brought to life with her own two hands. The crowd was silent, eyes wide, faces solemn as Lena's words echoed through the rooftop, each syllable striking like a hammer to glass. "People judge me because I didn't look the part," Lena continued, her jaw tight, her eyes flashing like steel, "because I didn't wear a designer dress, because I wasn't dripping in diamonds, because I didn't fit their narrow, shallow definition of what a successful person should look like." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, heads bowing, some in shame, some in reflection. "But let me tell you something," Lena said, her voice rising, her gaze sweeping over the sea of faces. "I am not defined by my clothes. I am not defined by my car. I am not defined by the opinions of people who think wealth is measured by the label on your dress or the price tag on your shoes." She paused, her chest rising and falling as she drew in a deep breath, her eyes blazing. "I am defined by my actions, by my integrity, by the kindness I show to those who are overlooked and underestimated. And if that makes me a nobody in your eyes, then I will gladly be nobody, because I would rather be nobody with a heart than somebody with nothing but a hollow soul." Applause erupted, thunderous, echoing through the rooftop like a storm. But Lena wasn't done. She raised a hand, and the crowd fell silent, eyes locked on her, breaths held in anticipation. And to those who laughed, to those who jeered, to those who stood by and did nothing while a woman was humiliated for simply existing, I ask you now, what kind of person do you want to be? Her gaze landed on a group of executives, the very ones who had whispered behind her back, who had doubted her capabilities, who had seen her as a mere investor, not a visionary. Will you be the one who sneers at the janitor because his shoes are scuffed? Will you be the one who mocks the woman in the simple dress because she doesn't fit your definition of wealth? Or will you be the one who steps forward, extends a hand, and sees a human being for who they truly are, beyond the surface, beyond the appearance? The wind howled, whipping her hair across her face, but Lena stood tall, unyielding, her voice a beacon in the storm. You see, the true mark of a person's worth isn't in what they wear, it's in how they treat those who have nothing to give them in return. And today, the world saw the truth. How easily we forget our humanity when blinded by wealth. How quickly we strip someone of their dignity when we think they're beneath us. Her gaze swept over the crowd, eyes fierce, heart pounding, but not anymore. Not today. Because today, a nobody stood up and reminded us all that even the smallest voice can shake the foundations of the tallest tower. And as Lena Reyes stepped back from the microphone, the crowd erupted into applause, a standing ovation that roared through the rooftop like a tidal wave. And in that moment, the world finally saw her. Not as a nobody, not as a woman in a simple dress, but as a force to be reckoned with, a queen in her own right, a woman who refused to be defined by the shallow standards of the world. As the applause thundered through the rooftop, Lena Reyes stepped down from the podium, her eyes still blazing, her chest heaving with the remnants of adrenaline. The crowd parted as she walked, heads bowing, whispers trailing in her wake, the respect in their eyes palpable. But Lena's gaze remained fixed ahead, her strides purposeful, each step echoing with the power of someone who had reclaimed her throne. Outside the building, the city shimmered under the late afternoon sun, the streets bustling with people oblivious to the storm that had just unfolded atop Titan Automotive. Lena's car, the $10 million hypercar that had been the catalyst for it all, gleamed like a black panther crouched and waiting. As she approached, a familiar figure stepped into view. Oh, a young woman with dark, tangled hair and clothes that hung loose on her thin frame, her eyes wide, cheeks hollow, and clutching a tattered backpack to her chest. Lena stopped, her heart tightening, recognition flashing in her eyes. The girl looked so much like Lena had once looked, standing on the same street corner, clutching her own tattered bag, eyes hollow from sleepless nights and empty stomachs. The girl's gaze darted nervously to Lena, her lips parting as if to speak, but then she caught sight of the hypercar and quickly dropped her head, her shoulders curling in as if bracing for rejection. Lena's chest tightened, memories flooding back. Nights spent sleeping in shelters, days spent being shoved aside, mocked, invisible, without a word. Lena stepped forward, closing the distance between them, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Are you okay?" Lena asked softly, her voice warm, gentle. The girl's eyes flicked up, her jaw clenched, and in that brief moment, Lena saw the same fire she had once carried, the fire of someone who had been beaten down but not broken. "I just need a place to sleep," the girl mumbled, her voice cracking, her fingers tightening around the straps of her backpack. "But they won't let me in because I don't look, rich enough." Lena's jaw clenched, anger flashing through her veins like molten lava as she remembered those same cruel words being thrown at her, the same doors being slammed in her face. Without a word, Lena slipped off her black leather jacket, draping it over the girl's shoulders, the scent of luxury and warmth enveloping her. "Come with me," Lena said, her voice firm, unwavering. The girl's eyes widened, her lips trembling as Lena opened the door to the hypercar, gesturing for her to sit. "But this car?" the girl stammered, her eyes darting from the sleek leather seats to the gleaming dashboard, her face a mask of disbelief. Lena smiled, her gaze softening. "This car belongs to me, and right now, it's taking you somewhere safe." The girl's eyes filled with tears as she climbed into the passenger seat, clutching the jacket to her chest like a lifeline. Lena slid into the driver's seat, the engine purring to life beneath her fingers as she pressed the start button. The dashboard flashing, "Welcome back, Lena Reyes." The girl's mouth fell open, her eyes wide, and Lena felt a surge of warmth as she pressed down on the accelerator, the hypercar gliding forward, leaving the towering glass building of Titan Automotive behind. The city blurred by, a symphony of lights and shadows, as Lena drove through the streets that once swallowed her whole, the streets that once called her a nobody. But now, she wasn't just a nobody. She was the woman who owned the streets, the woman who refused to forget where she came from, the woman who would never let another soul be left out in the cold. And as they pulled up to a luxurious hotel, the valet rushing forward to open the door, the girl looked at Lena, eyes glistening with tears, and whispered, "Why are you helping me?" Lena smiled, her gaze warm and unwavering, because once, someone did the same for me. And as she stepped out of the car, her hand reaching out to the girl, Lena Reyes felt the world shift beneath her feet. The world that once tried to crush her. The world that now had to bow to her. The city lights shimmered like fallen stars as Lena Reyes stood on the balcony of the penthouse suite. The wind tousling her dark hair, her gaze fixed on the skyline that once felt so unreachable. Behind her, the girl sat curled up on the plush couch, wrapped in a thick cashmere blanket, eyes wide as she devoured a plate of warm food, each bite a reminder that she was no longer alone. Lena's phone buzzed in her hand, the screen lighting up with hundreds of notifications. News articles, viral videos, endless streams of comments. The footage of her being mocked, humiliated, and ridiculed in the showroom had spread like wildfire. And now, the world was ablaze with her name, Lena Reyes, the woman. Everyone underestimated, from nobody to queen. How one woman shut down the rich and arrogant. Lesson of the year. Don't judge a woman by her clothes. Lena's jaw clenched, her fingers tightening around the phone as she scrolled through the comments. Some filled with praise, others with scorn, some calling her an inspiration, others accusing her of flaunting her wealth. The noise was deafening, each word a knife, each accusation a wound. But then, amidst the chaos, one comment caught her eye. It was from the janitor, Mr. Alvarez. "Thank you, Miss Reyes. You didn't just change my life today, you saved it." Lena's chest tightened, her vision blurring as she blinked back the sudden sting of tears. The wind howled, cold and biting, but inside her chest, a fierce warmth blazed. "Are you okay?" a small voice whispered, and Lena turned to find the girl standing behind her, the blanket draped over her shoulders like a royal cape. "I saw the video," the girl said, her eyes dark and solemn. "They treated you like you were nothing." Lena forced a smile, her throat tight, her pulse a steady, relentless drumbeat. "They did," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "Because that's how people see you when they think you're nobody. They judge you by what you wear, what you drive, and how much money you have. And if you don't fit their picture of success, they step on you like you don't matter." The girl swallowed, her hands clutching the blanket tighter. "But you showed them. You made them see you." Lena nodded, her gaze drifting back to the city below, the millions of lights flickering like desperate, grasping hands. "I did," she said, her voice a whisper against the wind. "But there are still so many people out there being stepped on, being ignored, being treated like they're invisible." The girl's eyes shone, and she took a tentative step forward. "Then what are you going to do?" Lena turned to face her, the fire in her eyes burning brighter than the city lights. "I'm going to make them see," she said, her jaw set, her voice fierce and unyielding. "I'm going to use every penny I have, every car I own, every connection I've built to lift up the ones they call nobodies, because I was a nobody once, and I know what it feels like to be invisible." The girl's lips trembled, her eyes filling with tears, and without warning, she lunged forward, wrapping her arms around Lena in a fierce, desperate embrace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice muffled against Lena's shoulder. "For seeing me?" Lena's eyes fluttered closed, her arms tightening around the girl, her heart pounding with the weight of everything she had lost and everything she had gained. And as they stood there, two nobodies who had finally been seen, the world outside raged on, the city lights burning bright, and Lena Reyes vowed that as long as she had breath in her lungs and fire in her veins, she would never let another soul be invisible again. In a world where appearances are worshipped and humility is mocked, One woman reminded us that true power doesn't come from the clothes you wear or the car you drive. It comes from the fire inside you. And as the world watched Lena Reyes rise from nobody to queen, one thing became clear: never judge a person by their appearance, because the next nobody you step on might just be the one holding the keys to your entire world. Would you dare to look a little deeper? Would you dare to see the person beyond the surface?